Dear respected viewers who are following the wider meaning channel, Israel is entering a phase where every tough statement begins to be tested right on the ground while still dealing with old hotspots. A new door has opened in Lebanon, and this time Turkey has chosen to step in instead of standing outside to observe. The war situation has therefore immediately changed its rhythm, becoming faster, fiercer, and more unpredictable by the hour. What was once considered an advantage has gradually become a burden, and calculations that seemed certain have begun to reveal gaps that are hard to conceal. The old order is shaking, and the feeling of control is slipping away right at the most sensitive moment. Respected viewers, please press like, share, and subscribe to the channel to follow the entire picture that is gradually turning to a new chapter. Israel receives an ultimatum in Lebanon. Turkey demonstrates firepower. Everything has passed the warning phase. A tough message has just been sent from Ankara, accompanied by images displaying military strength right before everyone's eyes. Video clips from Turkey show fighter jets roaring, missiles leaving launch pads, and drones hovering in the sky. This is no longer words. This is a signal that has been encoded through actions sent directly to Israel right in Lebanon. Meanwhile, the 21-hour negotiation session in Islamabad between Iran and the United States ended in deadlock. Tehran maintains its original stance, refusing all imposed conditions and affirming its right to self-determination. When diplomacy closes the door, the battlefield immediately expands, and Lebanon becomes the convergence point of new overall situations. On the northern side of Israel, clashes between Hezbollah and Israeli forces continue to escalate with high intensity. In the night sky, streaks of light comparable to heavy artillery rain down on various areas. Images recorded from Beirut show that the war situation has shifted to a different rhythm, more intense and closer than ever. At the same time, a series of geopolitical signals have appeared. China is being trolled for secretly increasing support for defensive weapons to Iran. Meanwhile, Russia also has its own moves that cause the balance of power to shift. These links are reconnecting, forming a tightening noose gradually around Israel. And right at this moment, what is noteworthy lies in the change of speed. All developments are occurring faster than predicted, more rapidly than the old script. A new front line has formed in Lebanon with the appearance of a factor that no longer stands outside. The story has not stopped at what is being revealed. The remaining part is what makes the entire region have to follow hour by hour. Negotiations collapse, missiles speak. Israel is pulled into the battle formation. The picture is shifting from tension to direct confrontation at a dizzying speed. After 21 hours of negotiations in Islamabad, all doors of compromise have closed. Iran maintains its original stance, bluntly declaring its nuclear rights and rejecting all pressure. When words stop, actions immediately take the lead. And this time, Israel is no longer facing a single front. On the ground, images from southern Lebanon show a completely different war rhythm. Barrages of heavy artillery rain down continuously. Missiles light up the night sky in successive waves of attacks with dense intensity. Hezbollah no longer maintains a moderate rhythm but shifts to continuous pressure, forcing Israel to stretch itself to respond at close range. Behind the battle lines, silent movements are creating much greater pressure. China is said to be accelerating the supply of air defense systems to Iran, while Russia appears with military support packages of high deterrent value. These pieces are not noisy but sufficient to change the balance of power. A support formation is taking shape, and it is heading straight for Israel's weaknesses. Meanwhile, Washington has begun clear military moves. Refueling aircraft have started deploying air assets and operating at sea near the Strait of Hormuz, showing that the United States is ready for an escalation scenario with no limits. That means the battlefield is no longer limited to a local scope. It is expanding across the entire region. What is being said lies in the fact that everything is happening simultaneously. Military pressure is accelerating, international backing is shifting, and strategic options are gradually narrowing. Israel is not only facing combined forces but also facing a battle formation that is being rearranged from many directions, and what has just appeared is only the tip of the iceberg. The crucial part is what can completely change the situation in just a few days ahead. Iran accelerates comprehensively. Israel's rear begins to shake violently. While the northern battlefield heats up hour by hour, another front is quietly creating much more dangerous pressure. Iran does not stop at responding, but shifts to a state of comprehensive acceleration, From tough statements to the pace of force deployment, every signal shows that Tehran is seizing the initiative and is ready to prolong the game in a direction unfavorable to Israel. Images of the infrastructure reconstruction process in Iran are spreading rapidly. A railway bridge that was destroyed near Qom has been restored at a speed that surprises many. Machinery operates through the night. Manpower is poured into every point. Every concrete block is rebuilt in a short time. The message is very clear. The strikes are not enough to slow down the operating wheel, and certainly cannot break the will. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, clashes continue to escalate, bringing pressure deep into Israel's interior. Successive missile barrages not only cause physical damage, but also create a clear psychological effect. When the war prolongs and expands, the story no longer lies in individual battles but in the endurance of the entire system. Another noteworthy detail is emerging from many unconfirmed sources. Reports suggest that types of missiles with long-range and multi-target attack capability are being mentioned as a factor that could completely change the situation if deployed. Just that possibility alone is enough to create a new layer of strategic pressure. While Israel has to stretch itself in many directions, behind it, waves of protest and regional instability begin to spread. From Beirut to other hotspots, demonstrations and political reactions are gradually forming a more unfavorable environment for Israel. Everything is converging on a common point. The pace increases, pressure increases, and strategic gaps become increasingly exposed. The story at this moment is not only about who attacks whom, but about which side can maintain the rhythm longer. And in that race, initial signs are making many people have to look back at the entire situation. The United States accelerates militarily, and ceasefire efforts begin to crack. While the Lebanon battlefield continues to blaze, another layer of scenario is gradually emerging behind. New signals from Washington show that the story has not stopped at the level of restraint. KC-135 refueling aircraft appear densely. Continuous shipments of military equipment from Europe are recorded. Each logistics link is being activated at a rapid pace. That clearly indicates one thing. Preparations for a long-term tense phase have begun. In parallel, circulating reports show that large quantities of military equipment from tanks to heavy weapon systems are being ordered and gathered. Images of vehicle convoys, overflowing warehouses, and air assets appear more and more. This is no longer a purely preventive move, but a sign of a pre-calculated plan. What is noteworthy lies in the contradiction between words and actions. While statements about ceasefire are still repeated at the diplomatic table, on the ground the pace of war preparations is clearly increasing. The gap between these two fronts is growing larger, and that gap itself is making observers suspicious of the real objectives behind it. In another development, the wave of reactions from the region is also rising. Images in Greece show Israeli tourists being blocked. Demonstrations with Palestinian flags appear right at tourist spots. These seemingly small symbolic details reflect a larger trend. The environment around Israel is becoming harsher day by day. All those factors are connecting into a clearer picture. One side accelerates preparations, the other is pulled in many directions. Meanwhile, regional public opinion is gradually changing its state. And when the diplomatic shells begin to crack, the core of the confrontation truly reveals itself. What is coming may far exceed all initial predictions. Strikes from many directions, missiles, navy, and pressure pouring straight into Israel. The situation no longer stops at hotspots on land. Off the coast, near the Strait of Hormuz, a tense confrontation between Iranian forces and the U.S. Navy has appeared, pushing the risk level up another layer. Ships flying the Iranian flag advance close. Close approach maneuvers occur in a narrow space where even a small deviation could trigger a chain reaction. This is no longer a show of force. This is testing limits. Meanwhile, information about missile capabilities continues to heat up the atmosphere. Unconfirmed reports mention systems capable of multi-target attacks with long range, carrying warhead separation technology. Just that prospect alone is enough to create enormous strategic pressure. When one strike can target multiple objectives simultaneously, the entire defense system is forced to disperse, and gaps begin to appear. Returning to the ground, Israel is facing an increasingly complex problem. To the north is Lebanon, with escalating combat rhythm. In the distance are long-range threats, and at sea are hard-to-control collisions. Each direction is a separate pressure, but when combined, they create a vortex that makes maintaining the initiative more difficult than ever. What is noteworthy lies in the rhythm. Everything happens in rapid succession, almost allowing no breaks for reorganization. When one hotspot just erupts, another immediately appears. When one threat temporarily subsides, a new threat is pushed up, and it is precisely that rhythm that is the most dangerous. It gradually erodes response capability, stretching the system to its limits. The question at this moment is no longer about a single battle, but how long Israel can endure before a chain of pressures that continuously accelerate. Internal pressure erupts, Lebanon surges with waves, Israel falls into a difficult position from within. While external warfare becomes increasingly fierce, another wave is rising right in the heart of the region, and this time it strikes directly at the political foundation. In Beirut, demonstrations by forces supporting Hezbollah erupt violently in front of the government headquarters. Crowds pour into the streets, slogans ring out continuously, demanding an end to all negotiation scenarios related to Israel. The tense atmosphere spreads widely, turning Lebanon's internal situation into a political hotspot parallel to the battlefield. What is noteworthy lies in the message that this wave sends. It shows a clear reality. Any compromise related to Israel at this time faces fierce reaction. When street pressure rises, diplomatic space narrows rapidly. Things that could once be handled through negotiation now become more sensitive and prone to explosion than ever. On the Israeli side, that creates a new, difficult situation. Not only facing combined forces from outside, Israel also has to calculate within a regional environment that is increasingly closed. When dialogue channels are choked, every move becomes riskier, and every decision can trigger a chain reaction. At the same time, information about backstage contacts between some related parties continues to appear, but it comes with increasingly large skepticism, declining trust, and rising suspicion, making every effort to de-escalate fragile. Any agreement, if reached, would also find it hard to maintain stability when the foundation is already shaking. All of this is creating a dangerous vortex. The battlefield heats up, pulling politics into eruption, and political instability continues to pour more oil onto the fire of war. And when these two vortices begin to intersect, the situation will no longer be within the control of any side. When all escape routes close, Israel is pulled into a position where it cannot retreat. The situation is advancing to a point where every choice carries extremely great risk. What has happened in recent days shows a clear trend. Escape doors have closed one after another from the Lebanon battlefield to surrounding hotspots. Pressure is no longer dispersed but begins to converge, creating a force that pushes Israel into an increasingly narrow position. A noteworthy detail is the change in the way the parties act. Decision-making speed is faster, steps are more decisive, and reaction time is shortened. That makes every scenario harder to control than ever. When there is no longer any lag, every small deviation can trigger a wide-ranging chain reaction. At the strategic level, Israel is facing a problem that is not easy to solve. Expanding the response means the risk of pulling more opponents into the game. Maintaining a defensive posture causes pressure to continue accumulating and spreading. Every direction leads to unpredictable consequences, and the time to consider is gradually disappearing. Meanwhile, the opposing forces show signs of more harmonious coordination from the battlefield, logistics, to political messages. Every factor is gradually fitting together. This is precisely what makes the battlefield dangerous, because when the pieces begin to synchronize, the pressure will increase exponentially. And at this moment, the story no longer lies in who strikes first, it lies in who can hold out longer as the noose is closing. What is happening is only the beginning of a more tense phase, where every limit can be pushed to the extreme at any time. When the chessboard is flipped open, Israel faces a decisive moment. Every piece is gradually fitting together, and the final picture begins to reveal itself at a speed that makes the entire region hold its breath to watch. From blazing Lebanon, the Strait of Hormuz tense like a plucked string, to military moves behind the scenes, all are converging on a common point. The situation has entered a phase where there is no easy way back. What is noteworthy lies in the fact that the initiative is shifting. What was once controlled now becomes unpredictable, while opponents once rated low appear in larger roles. When pressures from many directions pour in simultaneously, the ability to maintain balance becomes more fragile than ever. At the strategic level, Israel is standing before a clear crossroads. A wrong move at the wrong time can trigger a domino effect, putting the entire defense system into a passive position. Meanwhile, slowing down means allowing the opponent to continue tightening the encirclement. The rhythm of the game has changed. Everything happens faster, denser, and more decisive, with no longer any heavy intervals to calculate and catch one's breath. Every hour that passes brings a new variable, and each variable pushes the situation closer to a major eruption point. And precisely at that point, the biggest question will be answered not by words, but by what happens on the ground. A new order could be shaped right from the escalating collisions, and Israel at this moment is standing right at the center of that vortex. Tehran sets a trap right at the negotiation table. The United States falls into a dangerous passive position. Right when the negotiation round in Islamabad entered its first hours, the real situation was clearly revealed, because this was not a balanced negotiation, but a fight to the end where Iran proactively set a trap. Even before, the Tehran delegation had appeared with a dense lineup of the most powerful figures from the national security circle, diplomacy, to strategic masterminds. Meanwhile, the U.S. side, although still holding superpower status, entered the negotiation table in a state of being pulled into having to react instead of proactively imposing terms. President Donald Trump had set a clear goal: to lock down Iran's nuclear ambitions. But immediately, Tehran responded with a multi-layered formation. Washington had to face a series of overlapping demands from economy, security, to regional influence. This was a preemptive tactic with conditions that caused the opponent to disperse and lose control of the negotiation rhythm. The noteworthy point is the way Tehran uses time as a weapon. A ceasefire order does not mean de-escalation, but has become a strategic gap for them to consolidate their position. Signals from the region show that Iran is entering negotiations with the mindset of a side that holds the advantage after recent military developments. That makes each of their statements sharper, less soft diplomacy, and instead hard, decisive messages. In the opposite direction, the United States is facing a dangerous paradox. If President Donald Trump appears tough, the risk of negotiations collapsing will immediately push the region back into a vortex of conflict. But if concessions are made too early, Washington will lose its position and create a precedent for subsequent demands. This is precisely the double trap that Tehran has set by forcing the United States to choose. China enters quietly. The Islamabad chessboard is suddenly redirected. While the fight in Islamabad has not yet decided victory or defeat, a dangerous variable suddenly intervenes, causing the entire chessboard to shake. China, the name that previously held a behind-the-scenes role, has begun to reveal itself as a factor that can turn the situation. Signals about modern air defense weapon flows possibly being transferred to Tehran through intermediary routes have immediately made Washington recalculate all plans. Washington understands one thing: when air defense capability is upgraded, the Middle East sky will no longer be the home field of Western fighter jets. That means every U.S. military pressure plan will be severely limited, and Tehran only needs to let the information leak at the right time. They have already done enough to make the opponent hesitate. This is a silent threat tactic. Just the possibility of action is enough to create a deterrent effect. In that formation, President Donald Trump is forced to face a hard-to-accept reality. When every minute of negotiation drags on, the traditional military advantage of the United States risks being eroded. If Washington chooses escalation, they will have to step into a new combat environment where the risk of losses increases sharply. But if negotiations continue while the opponent quietly consolidates capabilities, the price to pay later will be even greater. At the same time, the China factor also creates broader strategic pressure. The indirect intervention of another superpower means every U.S. military action must consider the risk of uncontrolled escalation. A small mistake could trigger a chain reaction, turning regional conflict into confrontation between power blocks. Therefore, every decision of the White House at this moment not only relates to Tehran, but is also tied to a larger problem of global balance. Israel opens fire unexpectedly. Negotiations face the risk of chain collapse. Right when all eyes are still focused on Islamabad, a new spark has suddenly erupted from another direction: the Lebanon battlefield. Israel's airstrikes targeting infrastructure and targets suspected to be related to Iran linked forces have put the entire negotiation process into an extremely fragile state. This is a pivot that could break the entire balance that was already tense, like a plucked string. When the strikes appear at a sensitive time, Tehran has almost no choice but to respond to maintain face and credibility in the region. But once Iran reacts, the linked forces in the resistance axis may simultaneously activate, leading to a new escalation round that exceeds the control of those sitting at the negotiation table. In that context, President Donald Trump is placed in an extremely difficult position. If Washington stands aside, they will be seen as unable to control their ally. But if they intervene more deeply, the United States risks being pulled into a new front right when the negotiations have not reached a result. This is precisely the strategic bottleneck when every move can activate another escalation direction. Besides, the strike from Lebanon also carries an implicit message. The negotiation table is not the only place that decides the situation. Forces on the ground can still create events themselves to change the entire battle formation. That makes every agreement reached in Islamabad fragile, because just one unexpected development can cause the entire diplomatic effort to collapse in just a few hours. Meanwhile, Iran takes advantage of this situation to increase pressure. They can argue that negotiations cannot progress if the attacks continue, thereby shifting responsibility to the United States and its allies. Becoming a knife at the throat, the global energy market is shaken. The Strait of Hormuz, the vital transport route for nearly 20% of the world's oil, has been pulled straight into the game as a strategic weapon. Recently, interruption signals have appeared rapidly. Oil tankers have sharply decreased. War insurance fees have soared. Transport companies have begun avoiding the area, creating an extremely dangerous chain effect. Oil prices rise hour by hour, pulling inflation that directly pressures the U.S. economy and its allies. This is precisely the indirect stranglehold that Iran has unleashed, enough to force the opponent to back down. In this formation, President Donald Trump falls into a double-pressure vortex. On one hand, he must maintain a tough stance toward Iran to avoid being seen as conceding. On the other hand, he must face domestic reactions when fuel prices escalate, directly threatening the economy and voter psychology. Every decision made at this moment will involve trade-offs. What is worth noting is that they are exploiting to the maximum the world's dependence on Middle East energy. They do not need to close the strait completely because doing so would immediately trigger a military reaction. Instead, they choose selective control, making the oil flow unstable and unpredictable. This is a sophisticated tactic, creating enough pressure to force the opponent to rethink, but not crossing the threshold to cause full-scale war to erupt. In that context, the negotiation document in Islamabad becomes heavier than ever. Every clause discussed now is not only a diplomatic issue, but is directly tied to oil prices, financial markets, and the stability of the entire global economy.